Hello, everybody. Welcome to How to Speak Maintenance. If you're new to our podcast, welcome. We are sponsored by the Texas Apartment Association Education Foundation, and we bring guests onto our show to talk through the maintenance side of property management and how we can help support our maintenance teams. My name is Jason Fein, and I'm the Vice President of Maintenance at Dominium, and I'm here with Becca Ramati, who's the Vice President of the Texas Apartment Association Education Foundation. Thank you for putting this together, Becca.
Sure, no problem, Jason.
Is there anything you'd like to share with the listeners about TAAEF and anything that's upcoming?
Well, just a reminder for everyone watching about the TAA1 conference coming up in Fort Worth, April 14th through 16th. And for those of you in the DFW area or close enough to drive, we have a great one-day pass as well. And I will put a link in the chat of where you can find that. The other thing I wanted to briefly mention is that the TAA Education Foundation, TAAEF, we recently completed a research survey of 1,500 Texans to really understand what their attitudes were about careers in the apartment industry. And we've got some pretty surprising and interesting results. And really what it's creating for us is a data-driven roadmap of how employers can better recruit, retain, and advance their people. So I'll also add a link to that report, to that executive summary, and we'll have a webinar coming up soon, April 29th, with Jason Dorsey, who helped us to complete the research. So check those two things out.
That sounds like some pretty good information if you're trying to figure out how to close the back door and keep your employees. So
that's right. And find them too.
Yes, definitely. Well, our special guest today is Angel Davila from Gables. He's the National Service Trainer and Performance Manager, and I know that you're going to bring a wealth of knowledge to our call today. So would you mind talking to the audience about what drives you, what motivates you, and what you love about the maintenance industry?
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you, Jason and Becca, for having me here today. It's really an honor. I've been in the industry for about 20 years now and started off as a groundskeeper, kind of worked my way up through the ranks, make ready, maintenance technician, maintenance supervisor, regional maintenance. For the past about 7.5 years, I've been a national maintenance trainer formally. I was doing a lot of stuff for apartment associations, particularly the Austin Apartment Association. I've traveled the country. I've been to the lower 48, just kind of training different associations, certification courses. And what really drives me is when I first started off in the industry as a groundskeeper, I saw everybody around me, my supervisors, they were doing air conditioning installs, they were doing water heater repairs, and it was just really motivating and inspired me to learn as much as I could about the industry. And I was like, well, that looks pretty fun. I'm cleaning the pool, but this other guy's over here with some torches. And so training is really near and dear to my heart, and just seeing the light bulb go off in somebody's head whenever they can understand a complex subject matter. So that's what really drives me and motivates me to be a trainer. And that's why I love what I do. I wake up every day and I'm excited. So
that's great. Yeah, you've been a trainer for quite some time. I think it was Monarch before, correct?
Yes, sir. Correct.
That's awesome. Yep. No, without training, our maintenance teams aren't going to advance and grow and be able to service our residents. So you're doing the God's work right there. So nice job.
Thank you.
Well, today's topic is about the work that residents don't see. So what work or services do our maintenance employees provide and the residents may not even recognize are happening behind the scenes that keeps the property operational and or ensures the residents are well taken care of? So I wanted to start off talking about preventative maintenance. Preventative maintenance is important, and I think that a lot of times the residents don't see that because it's not a ticket that they put in, or it's not an issue that they had with their apartment. So can you talk about like preventative maintenance and what your thoughts are behind it and the importance behind it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think preventative maintenance is really paramount in our industry. It's better to be proactive than reactive. And so when we could catch something ahead of time, whether that's going to be that boiler that's about to fail, that's coming up on 25 years, maybe it's a high rise that has a chiller, strainer baskets haven't been cleaned out, but more on the garden style communities, it's really about maintaining our capital equipment, taking a look at our HVAC, so cleaning the condenser coils, taking a look at our evaporator coils. I always tell people when it comes to air conditioning, there's three main components of it, right? You have your electrical, you have your refrigerant, and then I always say airflow, airflow, airflow.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just about swapping out filters. It's when it's possible getting in there, cleaning out those return air grills, getting underneath there, getting a shot vac, but really just checking for everything, your water heaters, your plumbing fixtures, any of the wet areas, and identifying issues before they arise. Same thing if we're talking about external inspections, taking a look at gutters and downspouts. Do we have any areas where we could potentially have water intrusions? I think all too often as maintenance, we kind of focus on the inside of the apartment home and we kind of forget about the exterior where we could have some other potential issues arise. So preventative maintenance, it's going to save money. It's going to decrease our after hours emergency calls. And I think a lot of the times, like you said, Jason, residents, they don't really see that aspect. So
definitely. I mean, I'm a big fan of it's raining outside. You got a torrential downpour, maybe putting on some booties and a rain jacket and walking around the property and seeing how the water's flowing around your buildings, right?
Yes, sir. Absolutely, Jason.
Yeah. For, our listeners, if you're a community manager, it's important that you're knowing about these things, because as community managers are walking around the property, they can be able to help identify opportunities. I mean, what are your thoughts on, the bushes around the condensing units and how, community manager, the impact they could have by calling the landscapers and saying, hey, the bushes are getting too close to the condensing units. Like you said, airflow, right? We're not getting that heat out of there. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's really important, to inspect what we expect. We have a lot of expectations as community managers, as regional maintenance supervisors. So what I used to do whenever I was a regional maintenance supervisor and I'd go out for my quarterly audits or my monthly visits, I would not only ask the maintenance supervisor to come with me and walk the property, I would ask the community manager. And so just as you're stating, we would take a look at the bushes on the outside. Again, any kind of drainage issues, any kind of like problems that may arise ahead of time. So they would come with me to go walk at least 3 of the vacant units, take a look at the curb appeal. And it was so much easier doing it that way than just sending this long list of, a honey to-do list. It was better to have both people with me. So definitely being proactive and taking a look at your contracts is going to help out as a community manager.
Well, and Angel, a lot of this, we don't want, we want the residents to never know about any of these in some ways, because that means it didn't affect them and it didn't interrupt their lives and their days. But, this kind of boils down to a communications issue more than anything else. So do you have any sort of, things that have been really successful in sharing this, what this work looks like and why it's so important with both the residents, but also the office teams?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think communication is key when it comes to that. Getting kind of back to some of the curb appeal, I used to implement at many of the communities what's called patio partners. And with patio partners, it was really great because you would take one office associate and one maintenance team member. They were given a set of buildings that they would walk maybe once a week, once a month, depending upon the size of the property. So let's say the leasing agent 1 and maintenance tech 1 had buildings 1 through 5. The next 2 had buildings 6 through 10. So you're getting as many eyes and ears out there, but also pertaining to your question about the residents, we would send out really nice letters in advance letting them know, hey, this is to improve the overall curb appeal. It's to make the community safer. And it really took about probably a couple of months, maybe 6 to 8 weeks. And before we knew it, the residents no longer had those barbecue pits on their patios, no more trash left by the front door. So it was much better for the whole community as a whole, keeping it safe for office and maintenance alike. So definitely sending out that communication to the residents. And after a while, we started getting thank you notes. Hey, thank you so much. The property looks a lot better. We appreciate what you've done to the landscaping, and just really build that cohesion amongst all 3 parties, maintenance, office, and residents.
Great. What are your thoughts on the office team allocating time, helping the maintenance teams allocate time for preventive maintenance? Like, have you seen any situations where the office team helped facilitate preventative maintenance programs?
I mean, I would say to an extent, yes. Definitely sending out, email correspondence ahead of time, letting them know. I know earlier before the call, we talked about, leaving filters by the door. So that could be something that could be a little bit more if the maintenance team is struggling on their workload. And let's say the office might not have as much to do. It would really help us as maintenance if they did put the filters by the door. We'll go in there and install them. Same thing. I know a lot of the communities these days, the locks are taking batteries, leaving the batteries right by the front door, leaving a filter right there. I used to use the blue dye tablets to make sure that the toilets were not leaking from the tank to the bowl. So anything that could help us out would be extremely grateful. So
yeah, well, the maintenance teams are definitely very busy, so it's important to make sure that we make time for these things versus just firefighting all the time.
Yes, sir.
We kind of talked about inspections before we jumped on the call. If we're not walking these mechanical rooms and inspecting the systems, not just doing the preventative maintenance, but also just inspecting to make sure it's operating, the right way. Like, what are your thoughts on inspections and maintenance teams and how to make sure that those get done?
Yeah, definitely. So I think ideally in the perfect world, on a quarterly basis, we're doing these inspections, right? We're going, taking a look at our mechanical systems, whether that's a boiler, a chiller. But I think that one of the best ways that we could accomplish that is by having sister properties help out. If you're in an area where you have, let's say, 8 to 10 communities, having that sister property come and help out and kind of blitz on that. Because I know that a lot of the times we get really busy, right? We're over inundated with work orders, with emergencies. We have our make readies. So there's so many things that are going on. What I've done in the past is either utilize sister properties, or if the organization's large enough, using roving teams that come out and help out. Back at Monarch, we used to have dedicated national rovers, and they would come help out with our annual inspections. So we would have our annual fire inspection where we're putting in the fire stops, we're checking the smoke detectors, we're taking a look at the combination, the CO detectors. We would even be in there with CO readers, just to make sure that we didn't have X amount of part per million. And with these crews, they would come in and be able to help us out. So even if that's not possible, you really have to squeeze it in. If you don't have sister properties, it could be, there's a saying, how do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time.
Yep.
So,
well, definitely. I mean, if you don't have the ability to partner with a sister community or have a roving team come take care of it for you, making sure that the on-site team has time to complete those inspections is important, right? Because they might, if they don't have a lot of time and they have a lot of tickets and turns, we run into the issue of somebody just checking the boxes and saying that they completed it, and we don't want that either. So
yes, sir. And one thing I want to add to that is you could also stagger out your schedule. So you could consider having somebody come in Tuesday through Saturday, and somebody else may be able to do Sunday through Thursday. So that way, at least during that preventative maintenance time, you're creating that time to make sure that you could accommodate everything. So again, if you don't have sister properties, where there's a will, there's a way. We just have to get it completed. So
I think as an organization, it's just important to set the standard and say, preventative maintenance is going to happen. Completing inspections is going to happen. We can do it together as a team. We can allocate time for it. Just like you said, but one bite at a time, we can get through it. So it's important. Yes. What are your thoughts on after hours work, after hours emergencies?
So after hours emergencies, again, what I used to do a while back, I was a service manager for a 1,072 unit property.
Wow.
And it was really quite the undertaking. There was a lot to do. We had a lot of after hours emergencies. So once again, I kind of staggered my shift out to make it to where I had an early shift team and a late shift team. So basically, I would have certain groups that would come in from 8 to 5. I would have other people come in at 10 to 6 or 10 to 7. And that really helped distribute the workload. Every single day, at the end of the day, I learned this from being in the military, being in the Marines, we would have a daily debriefing. And so in the Marine Corps, you'd go on a mission. Whenever you got done with it, you talked about what went well, what we could have done better. Because I had such a large group and so many work orders and make readies and turns, the last 15 minutes of the shop every day, I would be there about 10 minutes before then, check all the emergencies, look for everything, the fire, flood, blood, whatever we couldn't get to that day. My 2 late shift team members, I would say, hey, late shift, let's go ahead and handle these emergencies. Another way that we could prevent things, like you said, preventative maintenance, taking a look at things before they go down, but also really setting that expectation with the resident. So during move-in, hey, I know a lot of the times we're signing all these addendums, right, whenever they're first moving in. But one of the things that we should really be doing is talking to them about what constitutes as an emergency and what does not, so, and really just resident education. I know that sometimes we want instant gratification. It's 100 degrees outside. Somebody's left that AC off the whole day because they heard on YouTube that it saves energy. No, we can let them know, hey, let's keep the AC at about 76, 78 degrees. As you know, air conditioners don't cool, they displace heat. So it's going to take much longer for that AC to cool down. So the more resident education that we could give, whether that's flyers, maybe it's a monthly, quarterly meetup, hey, come meet our maintenance team. And we could talk to them about ways, tips, and tricks to prevent these emergencies.
Yeah. I like what you talked about when you said you had the staggered, staff. I think it one of the struggles that a lot of maintenance teams run into is a resident comes home at 6 o'clock and then they say, oh, I forgot to put that service request in, or, oh, I just found an emergency. So having that staff member that's still there after 6 possibly could stop an emergency call to the on-call employee. So, which helps with morale, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great.
It's always Friday at 5 o'clock that the AC stops working.
You're not wrong. So let's talk about turnovers and preparing for turns. In your experience, can you walk through some of the best practices that you've encountered when preparing for turns and getting apartments ready?
Yes, sir, certainly. So one of the best ways that I like to do it, a lot of companies do this, but doing a pre-move out inspection. Each organization's a little bit different. Back at Monarch, we did it 60 days ahead of time, which seems like a lot. Or, you could do it 2 weeks out, 1 month out. But doing that pre-move out inspection is going to help you indicate the major components that need to be done, right? Carpet replacement. Is it a full paint? Is this going to be a touch-up? Do we have to do some resurfacing? And as you know, Jason, it's far easier to cancel a service in the middle of the summer than just to schedule it. All of our vendors are extremely busy. They have a lot going on. I worked at another place way back in the day called Rainier Properties, and we had these special dishwashers. I don't know why. This wasn't a regular dishwasher. It wasn't shaped like a cube, but it had this little indention in it. And for whatever reason, there was a long lead time to get those. So it's going to help you to be able to order those really unique items that might take quite a bit of time. We even used to use these stainless steel blinds, or at least that's what they looked like. And it would take like 6 weeks to fabricate. So that's a really, really important reason to get that done. Doing the pre-move out inspections and really walking with the resident, letting them know like, hey, we're not here to try to make $1 million off you. We're just really trying to pinpoint items that need to be ordered in advance, things that need to get done, and make that community home ready for the next person. Another thing is, again, really inspecting it. So I've always followed what's called the rule of right. I do that as far as when I came up as a make-ready technician, that's how I was trained. I would walk in that unit, write down my list of parts. This is what I needed. I would get my 55-gallon trash bag, put all my parts in there. I'd come back. Okay, door stop needed here, light bulb right here. And that's how I did the turn. And as I grew through my positions, that's how I inspect my turns also, rule of right. If you want to be crazy, you can take it on the left. But that's just a really good way. Have as many eyes on it as possible. What I've done in the past is I've had the maintenance supervisor walk it first. After the supervisor has walked it, the property manager, and even the leasing agent that leased it, when they're doing their little sparkle bucket clean, making sure everything's solid, have the leasing team go in there as well. Have as many eyes as possible, and definitely a checklist for the maintenance team to really go by.
Yeah. No, I like what you talked about. Get the trash bag, get the list, put a big pile of parts in the middle of the apartment, and just go to town, right?
Yes, sir.
I think I had a manager one time that said, if each trip to the maintenance shop takes 10 minutes, to get on your golf cart and drive down and pick something up. If you go get 6 parts, that's an hour, so it's important to kind of be able to allocate your time out and make sure you're as successful as possible. So
Yes, sir. I mean, there's a lot of windshield time, whether you're in a golf cart or if you're multi-site and you're having to drive property to property, that's a lot of windshield time that you're wasting. So another good thing you could do is if you are multi-site, have little sub shops, have little small sub shops, use that little garage that nobody's using, put the parts that you know are going to be needed for that particular property. And it's going to make it so much easier than having to run around.
But I like that. Well, one other thing I wanted to bring up too is the longer you're at a property or you're a maintenance employee at a community, you kind of learn what are the things that we kind of keep running into with service requests, right? Whether it's tubs leaking or it's backups or it's, whatever. That during that turn, that's your opportunity to be able to kind of address some of those larger scale issues that you've been having, throughout the property. So have you seen any success with that in the past? Adding some preventative maintenance to the actual turn, not just taking care of door stops and knobs and things?
Oh, absolutely. A while back when I was working new construction, you get that rotten egg smell on the water heaters, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that was one of the preventative things that we would do in every single turn is we would actually purge those faucets, let everything run, down into the shower, every single faucet. And as you mentioned, just really collecting that analytical information. And you could even do that during the PM, during the terms, kind of rate the condition of, what that appliance is. Right now, we're starting to transition into Sweet Spot.
Okay.
It's a platform that we're utilizing, and it really helps us to keep up with all of the tracking, the inventory, so we could catch items, like you said, before they start going down on us.
Oh, great. Well, Becca, have you seen any questions or anything coming up in the chat at all?
No real questions, but as we're sort of getting ready to wrap up, Angel, you talked before we went live about sort of the importance of modeling respect from leadership down. And I think that's real relevant for both the residents and the office staff, if you want to touch on that for a sec.
Yeah, definitely. So modeling respect is just very important, when it comes to the way that our residents perceive us. So really working cohesively. Um, I know a lot of the times whenever it comes in between office and maintenance, sometimes it's like, let's say a resident's in the office complaining. And, typically we call people by their titles. Hey, our service manager is going to go fix that today. Or, hey, this technician's going to come. It's really great to address somebody by their name. That kind of puts a face to the name. I was in this leadership course many years ago called the Dale Carnegie Leadership Experience.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things they told us in there was that one of the things that stuck out to me in the golden rules is a person's name to them is the sweetest sound in any language. And so by just talking to people, how many times do we want to be somewhere, we don't want to be told, hey, you. It's like, hey, Becca, or hey, Jason, I understand. So really just displaying that with our residents and everybody from the CEO to the investors to the groundskeeper, this is all an equal contribution and should be treated with equal respect. So definitely that's one of the ways that we could do that, and just being inclusive. So, having daily huddles, maybe having the maintenance supervisor conduct a safety meeting, right? So really working cohesively as a team is paramount to make sure that everybody sees that we respect one another. So
that's great. Last month we talked about recognition. In your notes that you sent us, and before we got on this call, you have some pretty cool things about celebrating wins, and you mind hitting on some of those bullets that you wrote us?
Yes, sir. Yeah. So celebrating wins, that could be as simple as, sending out a newsletter, right? Let's say, hey, this is our maintenance hero or maintenance legend of the quarter. I know that, NAA has something like that. So if your team is doing something and, that they've won an award, whatever, display that with the residents, let them know what's going on. It's the small victories. That's one of the ways that we could do that. It could even be newsletters, hey, meet our maintenance tech of the month. And they could talk about not just their experience in multifamily, maybe some of the hobbies, maybe some of the things that they like to do, and also incorporating maintenance into events as well. So, if you've been to Home Depot, you've seen those little workshops where, you build a birdhouse or build a car, setting that up. So community events are really important as well. And that helps out. It's again, showing that we're working together. So
that's great. Well, That's a wrap for today's episode. A huge thank you to you, Angel, for sharing your insights and your experiences. I know that the listeners are going to gain a ton of knowledge from it and some new ideas possibly about how to be able to work with their maintenance teams and help support them. So if you or anybody that you know is interested in any of our previous conversations, you can find us on the go as a podcast wherever you download podcasts, as well as on Facebook and LinkedIn. So thank you, Becca, for once again putting this together.
Sure. And YouTube and anywhere you listen to your podcast content, you can find us there as well.
Awesome.
And we'll be back next month, April 22nd, for another episode of How to Speak Maintenance. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.